Welcome to Hypno's Lions Roar. I am here with Amy Rosner. She is my guest today. She's going to tell us a bit about herself, and I think everybody's going to be very interested in what she has to say and her background. So, Amy, welcome. Where are you located at right now? Where are you calling from?
Well, thanks a lot for having me, Wayne. Appreciate
You're
it.
very welcome.
I'm in Mesa, Arizona, just outside of Phoenix.
Okay. All right. Is it hot there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in South Texas, so it's 105 here today. So
Is it? I haven't even looked at the weather in a while, but it's been up there. So
yeah. All right. So tell us a bit about yourself. Start from the beginning and go forward. How'd you end up where you're at right now?
Yeah. So I started in psychology many years ago. I'm actually from Phoenix, and I went to Wisconsin for school, and I really got into psychology, and then decided to get a doctorate in experimental psychology and in brain science, in particular biopsychology. So brain behavior, correlates and that kind of thing. And I specialized in laterality of function and cerebral dominance. So the way the two halves of the most modern and biggest layer of the brain act and interact to allow us to do what we do. And I was absolutely fascinated with all of that and had an amazing time and spent over 30 years in some aspect of psychology and brain science, and then got into some coaching, process efficiency coaching, things like that, and kind of came full circle with the hypno stuff. This is all just practical application of what I studied theoretically as a brain scientist. With the current neuroscience research as it is, and the whole reconstruction theories of how the brain works that have been getting just, bigger and bigger over the years since the 70s. It's perfect. It explains why these techniques like hypnosis and NLP are so easy and effective. Because we're just tapping into the brain, how the brain really works. It works by reconstruction. So that's what we do. We help someone do that reconstruction by, being a facilitator for that. So now I've had my own practice for over a decade, and I'm training others now as well. I have a newly internationally accredited program, mentoring program, where you can earn the titles of certified hypnotherapist and certified NLP practitioner in the same program. So I'm extremely excited about that. That's like big news close to my heart, because I'm a teacher at heart, and I absolutely love being able to reach a lot more people through the people that I'm training. So
gotcha. Now, let me ask you a question. The work that you did prior to you becoming a hypnotist, when you were doing that, did hypnosis ever come into the picture in terms of how you looked at hypnosis versus what you did? And was there I guess, a disconnect or a rejection of hypnosis based on how you were trained and that? Mm-hmm. Did that ever come into play for you?
Yeah, so you get that to some extent, and it's been kind of funny because over the years, like back in the 80s and 90s, when I was doing my coursework and getting my degrees in brain science and psychology, you really didn't hear much about a lot of that. Obviously, hypnosis has been around 150 years or thereabouts, right? Actually, you can take it back to the ancient Greeks, but right. But more recently, and it comes out of the medical system. So, it's always been and still is an elective in medical schools. So, I mean, it's ingrained in applied science, if you will, or, more clinically oriented applications of science. I was in basic science and brain research for many years. And there's So when you're doing experimental work, the biggest thing that you have to do is control variables. And when I kept thinking, thoughts are things and they impact how we feel and how we behave and all that. We never talked about how a rat was feeling or thinking when he was running in an operand box, right?
Okay.
That never entered into it, and it couldn't enter into it because we can't control that variable or set of variables, right? So that's noise in the system. That's data variability. And so, when you talk about hypnosis as a practical application, hypnosis, hypnotherapy, whatever you choose to call it, there's you are getting away from that, and so it's not about controlling; it's about facilitating someone making a change internally. And so we can't go into their head and change something.
Right.
And so there's a basic kind of disconnect there that I think has to be there just because of the way those disciplines are. And I've been in both for a long time, and so I can understand, both perspectives. And I think that really getting into hypnotherapy is what allowed me to really get a better, more, all-inclusive view on, how the brain really works. Not that, we know everything it does or exactly how it works in all situations, because we're very far from that. But I have a much better feel for it now than I did when I was just doing research, because I was only concerned with those things that could be controlled, right?
Now, did you find that when you crossed that bridge into hypnosis, was there a time before or after you crossed that bridge that it was like a connection that you go, aha,
Yeah,
moment? I mean, and did it
I
happen
did.
all at one time?
I had a few aha moments, actually. And the book, I have a new book out, and the reason that book is out is because it's the way that I have kind of sync the two together. So it's, as someone who was a, brain scientist by training, I want to be able to explain what's going on in a hypnosis session. I want to be able to explain how, even not even talking about hypnosis and not putting someone through an induction, how somebody can initiate an unconsciously driven process and make a change like that, like using an NLP anchor, for example, just something quick and easy like that.
Right.
How does that work, and how is that different from hypnosis? And what's happening in the brain during that time? So that's what my book explores,
And
because
what's the name
that's
of
what
your new
I
book?
need to know.
What's the name of your new book?
So the book is called Reconstructing Reality, Outsmarting the Brain to Rewrite Our Life Stories.
Wow. And it's out right now?
It is out right now. It's actually #1 Amazon bestseller in 3 categories. So
Well, good for you.
thanks.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's really
I will.
exciting. It's kind of my big contribution to the field, I feel like, even though it's, the more basic science community is really, not on board completely, even though there's a ton of research in it. In fact, most of the studies on hypnosis are review studies that
Right.
I have in the book, because there's so much research out there now on it.
And
And then people in the hypno community who are more kind of, less, scientifically oriented, it might get a little, scientific for them, but it's kind of like if a textbook and a memoir had a baby. So it's
Okay.
there's a lot of good scientific information in there, but it's also extremely easy to read. It's a quick and easy read. So.
And why do you think that the medical community is, I mean, your average MD and that is resistant to hypnosis? Because why do you think, why is that?
And that's a great question, because it came from the medical community in the first place. These techniques really, they as a more modern kind of therapeutic thing, they actually, came from the medical community.
Mhm.
Before there was a term for psychiatrists, there was hypnosis in the hospitals. So, hypnotherapists are the first psychotherapists, basically. So, back 150 years or so ago, or whenever the medical model really got popular, being applied to the mind, everybody got on board and thought, hey, this is a great thing. Let's go with this. Let's start. They came up with the concept of mental illness and had, symptoms that linked to a diagnosis and then a treatment based on the school of thought that you come from, theoretically. And so, and then there's a little group of them going, I don't know, man, that doesn't sound like a good idea. I don't think that's going to end well. We're just going to stay here. We'll call ourselves hypnotherapists, and you guys can keep the psychotherapist title and you can move on with the medical model.
Right.
But we're not going to do that. There's been kind of a push and pull thing going on with the medical community almost since the beginning. And it's interesting because I work with a lot of the medical community. I specialize in medically related hypnotherapy, and so assistance for medical issues, and some of them are really on board. They've taken that course in medical school. They've had experiences with it, and they are all for it. They send their patients, to hypnotherapists like myself, and they could not be bigger supporters. But then there's the other part of the community, which is at current definitely a bigger part of the community in medicine that are not on board, that are more interested in giving a prescription than trying something else like diet, for example, that can have amazing impact on your life. And so I use diet in my practice too, actually, because malnourished is a physical stressor, and that's going to change your brain processing as well. So you look at the person as a whole organism, the mental and the physical together, and the medical community, it tends to silo things. They forget the brain is part of the body, and that our subjective experience of brain activity is what we're calling, mental activity, right, or emotional.
Now, with the medical people that you work with, do you find that the ones that are on board with it or understand it, that it was a gradual movement towards understanding, accepting hypnosis, or did they experience it in medical school and were on board immediately? What is it? I mean, that's the first question. And the second question to follow up on that is, as hypnotist, how can hypnotists go out and approach the medical community in such a way that they can help educate them and bring them forward?
Yeah. Two great questions. The first one is, I've seen it come from all different places and in different ways. So, for example, I went out to lunch one time with a client of mine, a client and friend who had been a nurse for about 30 years. And we were meeting her friend who had also been a nurse for 30 years and was the head of nurse training programs at an enormous hospital community here in the Phoenix area. And we sit down and we're waiting for our food. And my client says, I have a terrible headache. And her friend, has a mobile pharmacy in her purse, right? And she's digging for some kind of pain reliever. And her friend says, no, my client says, no, just wait, just give me a minute. She closes her eyes and does a little self-hypnosis procedure that I had taught her to do. And it wasn't more than, maybe 2 minutes later, she opens her eyes and says, okay, all better. And her friend just looked at me and said, I need your business card. So when somebody, the best PR for what we do is undoubtedly someone who's experienced it, talking to others about their experience, because it's really difficult to educate people on this. And it's especially difficult to educate people who think they're already as educated as they need to be.
Right.
And there are a lot of those in the medical community. But some are definitely up for it. I had a doctor come in who has a pretty big practice here, but he came in to stop eating a big bowl of ice cream at night. And so, okay, he knew about hypnotherapy. He knew that it worked for like smoking and weight loss, things like that. And so he wanted some help with that. And he chose me because of my background, because I tend to have more of a scientific background than most hypnotherapists do. And
Right.
so that kind of, I get the skeptics, I get the scientists, I get the tech people, I get the medical community. They all tend to gravitate toward me because of my background. Which makes it challenging for me, because those are the folks that are going to have the hardest time with it, most likely. And I was one of those too. I had a hard time
Right.
with it, so I know where they're coming from. And but we quickly and easily got rid of the ice cream thing, and then we realized there were a couple of things that were deeper that we could work on as well, that would really help to reinforce that change in behavior. And he said that he knew that hypnosis was really good for some smaller changes in behavior, but he never understood at all that it could really help with deep personal issues, like core beliefs about yourself and things like that. He had no idea that it went as deep as it actually does. So he was educated through being in that process himself, and then he sends patients over whenever he feels like there's something that's out of his scope of practice, but that hypnotherapy may be able to help them with. So there's it all, and then there are some others that as soon as they hear I'm a hypnotherapist, they just don't want to talk to me. It's like I'm doing pseudoscience or something, and they just
Right.
yeah. So you get the whole spectrum.
Now, on with today, the way that things are with hypnosis, and you could be a trash collector and say, hey, I need to change jobs and get educated and go to certification, become a hypnotist, and that. For people who are doing that, from your perspective, with your background, what else besides just getting certified as a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist, what else would you point them to better round themselves out?
I think, I think there's an art and a science to what we do. And the science is what my book is all about. The art is practice, practice, practice.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have some mentoring students who come in who have a lot of certifications, advanced degrees, things like that, and no experience whatsoever, because they're scared of having sessions. And so they're not getting that art part.
Right.
And so my program is a mentoring program. And so I'm working with them one-on-one, and we also have group meetings every week, and they're encouraged to practice with one another. And I tell them, okay, I don't want to hear one thing about another certification or advanced degree until you've had 100 sessions. That's it. Right. Do 100 sessions, then we can chat, right? You have to have that practice component. And that's missing in a lot of the programs, or people are going off on their own to practice rather than having that, guided coaching through that process. So it's kind of the blind leading the blind in many cases. Right. And that's not real helpful. And I think that's shortchanging the students, because they're going to a program because they want to learn how to do it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so there's, there's that. And then there are some people who've done a lot of coaching. They've done, maybe they've read in a book of some, hypno techniques or NLP or something like that. And I know people who've been very successful just reading a book and applying things. Like, it's not hard to do. What we do is the actual protocols are very simple and very easy to do, but it's very difficult to do really well, to really help that client make a big change in their life. So mm-hmm. It's easy to do, but it's really hard to do well. And so that's kind of where people need some extra training, is not just to learn, how to do suggestion therapy, or how to guide someone through imagery, or how to do a regression session or parts therapy, whatever. You have those tools at your disposal, but it's really practicing and knowing, okay, here's where my client wants to eventually go, find confidence in himself again. How am I going to get him there? And a session of parts therapy isn't going to do it. Most likely it's going to be a more complicated thing. This is a core issue. There's a lot to it. And so, it's drawing on your experience, which just comes from doing a lot of practicing, and having a variety of tools at your disposal that you feel comfortable using, that can help get someone from A to B So, and then from B to C, and then from C to D, and just take it one step at a time, eat the elephant one bite at a time until, that issue is solved. So, yeah.
Sometimes I tell people learning hypnosis is the easy part. I can show you how to hypnotize somebody in an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like the dog chasing the car. That's great, but what are you going to do with it once you catch it?
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what I relate it to. So, now, do you find that with hypnosis and what you were talking about, getting that experience under your belt and to where you can work with people and have that 100 sessions of being almost like a detective, in the sense to where you're looking at the pieces that are popping up and you're moving them around on the table in order to put them in the best position to lead them, because some things will be self-correcting as you go through the process. How would you teach a person or show a person on how to be that detective and move those pieces around effectively?
Yeah. So I think that comes down to coaching, and it's asking good questions, and listening, really listening, not listening to respond, but listening to understand, listening for those non sequiturs. Oh, I had this great relationship with my dad and we did this and that together and everything. And he was kind of a rapist, but we did this and that. Okay. Back up a second. What was that? Right. That's an actual thing that happened to me at one point. So,
interesting.
And she's like, what did I say? She didn't even know she said it. It was a classic kind of Freudian slip. Right. And so just you're investigating, you're taking in all the information you can get. And then you have some tools at your disposal that you can use to help get that person where they want to go. But you don't know where they're at now in order to do that gap analysis and figure out what's the best way to get them where they want to go until you know where they are, right?
Gap analysis. I like that term, gap analysis.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a neat term. I've got.
And it's interesting because most people don't know where they are right now. They know where they want to go, or they think they do, but they don't know where they are right now. And their conscious mind definitely doesn't know. Now, their conscious mind knows, but they're not listening to it. They're listening to that voice, and that's not their unconscious mind. That's not the real them. They need to listen to the images and emotions and body sensations, right? And we're not taught to do that. And some people intuitively do, but yeah.
Now, do you find that, we're not taught to do that, but do you find that some people can be resistant in actually looking at that because they really don't want to know?
Yes. Yeah, I will see that. Because the brain is protecting you all the time. That's its big job. It is protecting you so you can continue to have a life. And if there's something that's in one of those mental closets, I call them emotional monsters that are in mental closets. And if there's some, big, hairy emotional monster in one of those closets or shoved under a mental rug somewhere or something, it was locked in that closet for a reason. It's locked in that subconscious closet for a reason. So when you start unlocking and opening those doors, it's like opening Pandora's box, and there's stuff that's going to come out, and you subconsciously know this, even though consciously you may not have any idea what's going on. Your subconscious knows. And if I'm about to, for example, I had a session with somebody that all I wanted to do was get her to imagine a sacred space, a happy place. Easiest thing in the world for anybody to do. She had good imagery abilities, good visualization abilities, and she could not see anything but what she described as a black veil in front of her. And she was actually in my recliner doing this number, trying to look around the veil, and she couldn't see around the veil. I thought, whoa, I didn't know people did that. And so we had that black veil, that's fear. Right. So we had to have, a couple of sessions basically at the same time. We had to get rid of that black veil of fear. And then as soon as that went away, boom, the world opened up in technicolor and detail.
And then how far was the progress that she had, and in what time period from that?
So it was her 6th session, which a lot of us say like a lot of issues are going to require between like 3 and 6 sessions, because you start kind of superficial and then you go into deeper stuff as the brain will lead you there, right? And so if you're down in that subconscious muck there with various issues going on for several sessions, you're probably getting to the initial sensitizing event pretty quickly. And so that's the big the thing that started it all. So if you have a confidence problem or you feel bad about yourself in some way, it all started with that ISE, that initial sensitizing event. And so when your head gets back to there, or it's about to go there, then, part of your head knows this, your subconscious knows this, and it will, if you're not feeling like you can handle that right now, you will shut down. And there's nothing consciously you can do about it, because the conscious mind's never in charge. So, and there's nothing the conscious mind can do the subconscious can't. It's just kind of a survival mechanism, that we can do a little logic and reason with that, but we can't, there's no conscious processing except maybe a little bit of voluntary motor. But otherwise, it's just kind of a place where some results of subconscious processing will go. And so you can be aware of some of the results of subconscious processing by your conscious mind, but that's it. So, your brain knows, but your conscious mind isn't clued in. And so, they don't realize what's going on. They don't realize that their brain thinks they can't really handle it. But with a little work on our part to help them increase their perceived strength, emotional strength, to deal with whatever that monster is in the closet, then they can be like, okay, all right, I've got this. Like, I've gotten some smaller monsters out of the closet and they weren't as big a deal as I thought. So this is the same. Okay, let's do this. Let's get the big monster. And that's when, boom, that veil goes away and there's detail and color and everything in front of them that wasn't there a second ago. And I've seen this multiple times. So, your brain will shut something down if it feels like you're not in a good place to deal with that yet. And maybe that same person comes back. Maybe we can't deal with that at the moment. They come back 2 years later saying, okay, I'm ready.
Right.
And then you can go there. Yeah.
So so if you've got a client that's having that battle within, how does that manifest itself while they're in hypnosis? What are you watching for in terms of the body, the releases, and hitting that sore spot?
Yeah, again, you just have to be listening and looking for anything that doesn't seem to follow from, anything else. And sometimes you don't really get any clues at all. You would think that if there's something really troubling in someone's head, that they might have an inkling that there's something troubling there.
Right.
No, your brain will shut it down completely. And I've seen this as well, where someone would let something out. He let out something about a smell. This is someone who had many traumatic experiences from being in the armed forces. And he was relating a narrative of some other event, but then this smell came up. Mm-hmm. And it didn't have anything to do with anything. And it was a non sequitur, and I just kept it in mind. And afterwards, when we were talking, I asked him about that, and he had no idea what I was talking about. Yet his subconscious mind tried to get it out there, right? It was saying, hey, wait a minute, we need to deal with this. And then it got shut down. And so, so the next session I said, hey, would you be open to investigating that smell that came up last time? And, smell, emotion, and, memory are pretty much the same neural system in many ways. So, so the smells are always significant. And he said, okay, I don't know why you would want to. I mean, there's nothing that comes up at all, but yeah, I'm game. Okay. And it wound up being an extremely important thing. And he was able to give me the whole play-by-play of where that smell came from. But yeah, it's just the same as with consciously coaching, someone, listening for the things that are a little off, watching body responses that may be a little off. If you say, hey, so are you really ready, to make this change? And they're like, yeah, I'm like totally down for it.
Right.
Okay, let's talk,
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So just being aware of those things, being really vigilant for those kinds of things. Yeah.
Okay. So if you have a client or somebody that comes to you and says, "Look, uh, I don't remember the vast majority of my childhood from 12 years old and back or whatever, that there's missing memory there." How would you approach that? Because it's missing memories are very interesting. You have to be careful with them. Uh,
Yeah, and you see it all the time. Like,
yeah.
I'm sure it's come into your office many
Oh,
times. Like, we see it all the time, right?
right.
So, yeah, and it could be coming from a number of different places, and some are benign, and some are, you got to really watch out for. So it's I just always try to keep it as simple as possible, and just always go back to, why is that client here today? What does that client want to work on today? And focus on that. And if there's something that's not related to that, but that the subconscious mind wants to, make a point of bringing up at some point,
Mhm.
the more you're having sessions like that, and that person's in that state, the more likely it's going to come up again. it's
Right.
it's already trying to come up. It's going to keep trying to come up, and then at some point, it's going to start coming up in their dreams. It's going to come up just when they're zoning out the window more and more, because when your brain's ready to deal with something, it's going to keep kind of harping on you to work on it. And if you keep putting it aside, okay, let me give him a headache. Maybe then he'll realize he needs to do it. And so you start taking pills for a headache, and it's like, okay, he's not listening. So let's just make him really, really cranky in traffic. Okay, still not. Are you listening now? No. Okay, so let's give him some IBS symptoms or some allergies, or it can be anything
Right.
psychological or physical. And then you wind up with this list of things that you want to change. People will come into my office with a whole list of things. I'll say, okay, pick one, and we'll focus on that, and then go down, deeper and deeper until we get rid of everything. And at least half of that list is going to fall off.
Right.
They're all different
Yeah, it
manifestations, because you
self-corrects.
didn't listen to the first, 10 that your brain was trying to get your attention with. And, number 11 finally got you into the office to do something. So,
Gotcha.
yeah.
That's always. I mean, I'm still fascinated by the stuff that happens.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, I don't understand the vast majority of the why. All I know is it works.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can give the theory on it, and one theory is as good as another theory. I mean, but the fact is that it works,
Yeah.
and which is an exciting thing for me anyway.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your move into. I noticed on here the ketogenic diet and a carnivore or that. So how did that come into play with you and hypnosis?
Yeah, so I've always been really interested in that. I was a big gym rat, almost competed in bodybuilding there for a bit. And so, that's always been something that's been kind of on my radar. Um, and the more I researched it, the more I realized that there was so much bad information out there, and that it was hurting us, not just physically, but because the brain is part of the body, emotionally as well. And when I have clients coming in saying, I want you to make me feel good about drinking 5 shakes a day and not eating any real food, it's like, okay, I'm not your girl for that. Like, I'm not doing that. But I will kind of get sneaky. You got to get sneaky with brains. You just got to get sneaky with them, and you can get some things in under the radar. And the next visit, she wasn't going to do the shake thing again, and she was eating better. But that I did some advanced coursework with Dr. Annette Bosworth on the ketogenic diet, and a lot of what she does actually is kind of veering into carnivore too. She does these sardine fasts, which are pretty interesting, and
I've heard of
blow
those.
your mind. So we did that. I've done a number of 72-hour fish fasts, and where those little fish are the only thing on the menu for a few days, and it's amazing how that kind of cleans up your system. You wind up getting omega-3s like a dolphin, and it just, that's, your brain loves that. And so, with, and then I also took another course with Dr. Georgia Eade, who is a nutritional psychiatrist from Harvard. She left there, I think, a couple of years ago, but she has a new book out called Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. And it is fabulous. Everybody should be reading that book. And it's done really well as a self-help book as well. So you can look and see, okay, I'm having these problems, what should I, do in terms of diet, and what am I willing to do right now? Coming from a standard American diet, it can be really difficult to jump into something like keto or carnivore. Even coming from a carnivore adjacent keto diet going into straight carnivore, there's an adjustment. There's a physical adjustment that happens that I've experienced, and but there is so much therapeutic value in how you're feeding yourself because you are what you eat. And people say, well, there's nothing inherently wrong with carbohydrates, and that's true. But we're eating as many carbohydrates in one day as our ancestors ate in an entire year.
Right.
That's toxic levels, right? By far. So there's nothing wrong with in that sense what we're eating. It's how much of it we're eating. And then you take the what part of the equation, which is, a lot of our food isn't really food anymore. And so what are we actually eating? Like, you're in an amazing situation to have that, first class meat available to you right there.
Oh, without a doubt. And that was done by design. I mean,
more power to you. Yeah. The only thing better is going out and, killing your own, right? Like, hunting for your own, like, but there's, if you take a look at our ancestors, I ask people, okay, 1 million years ago, your ancestor could eat spinach or water buffalo. Which one is she going to choose? And they always say, oh, well, the water buffalo. And I'm like, then why do you feel like you need to get away from meat and eat a salad at every meal?
Exactly.
And then, then the gears start turning, it just doesn't pass the sniff test, all of this plant-based stuff. And I've been down that road. I'm a recovering vegan. Okay. I was a vegan for almost 3 years and wound up with leaky gut and a number of other things going on because of it, but accidentally cured that 20 years later with a primal diet.
So how did the connection with hypnosis and the keto come into play? Was it just because of personal experience? Or
it started that way, and then I realized, there are, after taking these courses, especially with Dr. Eid, if you change your diet, you're going to change how you feel emotionally, how you're thinking, everything. So because you're changing your brain chemistry, so you're going to change everything. That's a subjective experience of your brain activity, right? So I started. I had used dietary interventions. I'm also a certified health coach, primal health coach. So, and I got that certification just so that I felt like I could actually address this, because I had too many people coming in that were eating a crazy unhealthy diet, hardly eating any protein. They're eating, huge amounts of certain plants, which, all plants are toxic. And so if you're eating just a little bit of different plants, you're not getting a whole lot of each of those toxins. But if you're eating, spinach at every meal or something, you're getting a level of oxalates that's just crazy. And there have been 2 of my clients so far that they had problems with anxiety, with anger issues, with a number of things. And one of them had arthritis so badly that she was, that she couldn't wash her hair or anything. And I asked both of them, I just happened to talk to them and say, it sounds like you might be sensitive to oxalates. Do you eat any spinach or, a really hefty greens? And, oh yeah, every day I make a shake with them and with almond milk. I'm like, okay, and almonds too. So those are the 2 biggest sources of oxalate. So for both of them, I said, just do a little test and see, get away from those greens and the almonds, use like coconut milk instead, which is low oxalate, and just see how you feel. And both of them, and they were very different, had very different issues, but both of them said that within 24 hours, they noticed both physical and psychological changes just from doing that. So the toxins in plants, it's a real thing. And it's something that, especially as we get older, we have to pay attention to, because we're going to be more, we build up the toxicity in our bodies as we go through life. We're going to be more sensitive to those things. And when I have somebody come in and they've got, they're anxious all the time, they have big anger issues. They're just really cranky all the time. And I say, hey, you know, are you interested, as we do sessions to deal with the psychological stuff, are you interested in hitting it from the physical side too? And if they say yes, then I had somebody who, she could have been an underwear model. Like, she was just gorgeous. And within a week and a half of going carnivore for more of a plant-based diet, she said she could see her abs for the first time ever. She's like, I'm a believer. You know,
Oh, wow.
I'll do this forever. And she stayed on that. Not one of my clients who has gone down that road, keto adjacent, or carnivore adjacent, you know, road, has gone back to the way they used to eat, because they felt so. She said that she was thinking, after 5 months of carnivore, she said, you know, I feel like I should add a greens drink every day. And I said, okay, why do you feel that way? And she said, because everybody's telling me I should.
Right.
And I said, okay, well, if you want to, why don't you just try it and see how you feel? And she said, I'm scared because I've never felt this good in my entire life emotionally. And I'm scared that if I do that, I'm not going to feel as good. And I'm like, well, just try it and see, you know, and that's how you have to listen to what your body's telling you. Some people can handle that just fine. Other people can't, but it's not something that's on our radar as a society. You know, we're not hearing enough about that. And so we don't realize, and then, you know, we have these chronic conditions that we don't know where they're coming from. Our doctors aren't helping us. You know, they don't know any of this. I mean, they're not getting nutrition in school. That's an elective in med school, like hypnosis is. But if they take that elective, they're only getting a maximum of 30 hours of nutrition education. And it's whatever the, you know, companies supporting the medical school want them to, you know, come away with in terms of knowledge. And so, you know, you go for a health coaching, like my health coaching program, I've got hundreds and hundreds of hours of, you know, basic research study and all that. And so I have doctors that come to me for that kind of information.
Well, you know, it's interesting. My wife went to the doctor a couple of days ago, and they did her blood test and everything. When they brought her in to review it, and her cholesterol was, according to them, elevated.
Mm-hmm.
Everything else was fine,
mm-hmm.
but the doctor was hell bent on trying to get her onto a statin.
Yep.
And she goes, "It's not going to happen. I'm not taking a statin because, you know, whatever you think about cholesterol or that's, you know, that's the way you're trained in that, but that's fine. But I'm not doing a statin.
Mm-hmm.
Not happening."
Mm-hmm. Good for her.
Yeah. And the same thing with me when I went into my cardiologist 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't seen him since last August. And I went in there and I was down over 80 pounds between that time and the time I went in there.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
And do you know that when he came in, he didn't say one, because I talked to the nurse because she asked about the medication. I said, well, I haven't done the medications in months.
Mm-hmm.
Because my blood pressure stabilized and it's fine and blah, 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 blah. And I told her, I said, I'm doing the carnivore diet. And we had an extended conversation about it. So anyway, she went and told the doctor. He came in and didn't say one thing about the weight that I lost. And he just proceeded to sit down to me and say, okay, here's the medication and here's why, da, da, da. And you kept talking about the statin. I said, look, I said, it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Not in this lifetime, not your life, not happening.
Yeah.
And then I finally said, look, I said, I'm down over 80 pounds. You haven't said anything about it. And it was like he went like, yeah, I know what you've done is very impressive. Most people won't do it and can't do it or whatever.
It's a better result than you can get from medication.
That's exactly what my point. And he didn't acknowledge it. He didn't say
because it's not in his worldview. Yeah.
No. Well, I went back to the VA and I told him, I said, I want a referral to a different cardiologist.
Yeah. Good for you.
I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this.
Yeah. Well, you know, and the thing is, they're not up on the research because the cholesterol hypothesis of, you know, heart disease was falsified over a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
So this in scientific community, they know better. They know this. It's not, you can't be looking at cholesterol. You can't be looking at LDL. You have to be looking at VLDL and triglycerides and HDL. And if those levels are in good places, then you're fine. It doesn't matter what that total LDL level is. It doesn't matter what your total cholesterol level is. So, but most people don't know this.
Right.
And most doctors are not talking like they know it either. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they're talking like they don't. And so there's, you know, and you can find it. I mean, this is all, there's a guy, what's his name? Someone Diamond, I think. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name now, but he's got a video on YouTube where he takes the initial data, the actual data from the studies of statins that got them the approval to be sold to lower cholesterol, and showed in no uncertain terms that they make no difference whatsoever. Zero. None. And if you look at the number of people that are on statins, there is no difference in heart disease. There is no difference in mortality. And in some cases, it actually can promote dementia.
Right.
Statins can promote dementia and a number of other things. And we're just getting started, you know, because when a drug is very, very popular and approved, it tends to not get studied very rigorously for a long time. And then when scientists start doing that, all this stuff starts coming out, you know, and then it's like, oh man, there's probably only a very small subset of people who should ever be taking statins. And yet it's one of the most prescribed medications out there right now.
That's just amazing. That's just amazing. So when people if somebody comes to you and says, you know, I've got to get healthy, I need to lose some weight, and that I want hypnosis to do that with. Do you speak to them at the same time about their diet?
Yes. Yeah, I always do.
So if a person comes in and says, you know what, I've found this Mediterranean diet and I want to do this and I need help with hypnosis to get me to stick with that, how would do you say, hey, look, you know, that's probably not the best diet for you to be on?
No, because I don't know what the best diet is for them. But I do know that we tend to misinterpret the Mediterranean diet here quite a bit.
Right.
And it is actually an animal heavy diet in the traditional Mediterranean diet. And there are some really good foods in that diet that will really help with brain health, which is my main concern, although total health of the body will indeed impact the brain. So there's that. But I always ask them, if they want to follow a certain diet, I ask them, well, what is your ultimate goal? So diet aside, what's your ultimate goal? Is it to be healthy? And if so, healthy how? Are there certain test results that are bothering you that you want to get a handle on and do better?
Okay.
Are there certain feelings that you have or symptoms that you want to alleviate? What is your goal in doing this? Because a lot of times people don't know why they're trying to do something. They just have been told they should. I had a friend who was asking about turmeric for, you know, it has some anti-inflammatory properties. And she was talking about she's like, I was thinking about adding turmeric to my, you know, supplement stack. And I said, oh, okay. I'm like, why? And she said, well, for anti-inflammatory, you know, reasons. And I said, well, are you inflamed? Do you have signs of, you know, chronic or systemic inflammation? And she wasn't sure. And I said, well, so here are some ways you can kind of test for that if you want to see if you have inflammation. And if you do, instead of masking it or trying to get rid of it on the back end, how about figuring out what's causing it in the first place and then making that change instead of adding something to your diet? And people don't know this generally, but turmeric increases activity of 3 known cancer pathways.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, people take supplements like that. I think you have to look at plants like medicine. There are going to be some good impacts. And there are going to potentially be some negative impacts. And it depends on the person and how sensitive you are to various things. But all plants are toxic. It's just a matter of degree. And Dr. Paul Saladino does a wonderful job of explaining this in his book, The Carnivore Code. And so anyone interested in this, I encourage you to get that book or go to Dr. Saladino's website. He hates that the first part of his name is salad. He likes the dino part at the end.
I wouldn't have made that connection, but yeah. Now I'm not going to be able to not make it. So, you know what? It's interesting you said about the vitamins, because I literally, before I started Carnivore, I literally had a counter full of different supplements. And at one time I was probably taking 25, 26 pills a day of different
Yeah.
supplements. And my wife would be reading. She goes, "Oh, we need to take this," and she'd
Mhm.
order it. And
Your whole schedule of your day
oh,
is
and all of
going
that
around
stuff.
the
And there
supplement.
were times
Yeah,
I would take
yeah.
those pills, and man, it would just tear my stomach up. It was like,
Ugh.
oh my gosh. But as soon as I started Carnivore and I started educating myself, all of that went out the window. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's really interesting how that works, because something like vitamin C, for example, which most people think you can't get from meat, you can get all the vitamin C you need from a nice slab of beef or something, but they think that they can't. They think they have to supplement vitamin D, or vitamin C, excuse me. Most of us do have to supplement D just because we're not getting enough, sunlight. But if you're getting enough of that, you don't need to supplement D. But vitamin C actually is outcompeted at binding sites in the body by carbohydrate, by sugar. So if you're eating a very low carbohydrate diet, you're not out competing the little bit of vitamin C you've got in your system from the meat that you're ingesting, and it can make it to the binding sites, and it's all that you need. You don't need to take extra. But if the more plants you're eating, the more carbohydrates you're eating, the more it is necessary to supplement vitamin C, because they're antagonistic to vitamin C, those sugar
I'll be
molecules.
darned.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's just fascinating. The stuff that we do because of what we hear, other than the fact that we just hear it and we do it. Because I mean, when I was younger, the main magazines that I read were Muscle Fitness, uh, the martial arts magazines, and they always had articles in there. Take this supplement and do this, and
The
here's how
supplement
you,
industry is what keeps those magazines going. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
And
And
there's supplements. People forget that it's supposed to supplement a deficit. That's what a supplement is supposed to do. But you don't take it without knowing if you have a deficit. So, if you can get blood work, or you can get some indication, like magnesium is something that almost everybody is deficient in, and you can't find out about it from a blood test, because it's so important. Your body will make sure there's a decent amount of magnesium in your blood, so it's always going to be okay. But if you take magnesium supplementation, and you can take quite a bit of it, and you're not stuck in the bathroom, then you're probably deficient, and you need to supplement that. We used to get those minerals from our water in nature, but we're not getting that anymore. Even spring water isn't mineral rich like it used to be anymore.
my place here, we're on well water.
Oh, there you go. Okay. So again, like, you have set yourself up with an amazingly healthy
Yeah,
environment there.
I mean,
Yeah.
it does
That's
go
what
through.
we have.
We do put it through, filters and that to get rid of some
Mhm.
of the odors and that. But
Mhm.
we've got two wells on the property, one to service the animals and the others to service the house.
Yeah. That's not, I
And
see, I'm on city water. So
yeah, yeah,
I'm not getting any of that. And so, I go to my, supplements for electrolytes, just to make sure I'm getting the minerals that I need. And, but otherwise, I mean, there are very few things you need to supplement if you're on a carnivore, or perhaps carnivore adjacent diet, depending on what your body likes.
okay,
And, people really, they just don't know. They feel like if you're only eating meat, then you're like, all the nutrition's in the plants. And actually, the plants, oxalate, for example, will actually rob your body of nutrition instead of providing nutrition. So if you eat spinach for calcium, and for iron, right? Like Popeye,
yeah,
then you're going to be sorely disappointed, because yes, those minerals are in spinach. But number one, the iron is not heme iron, and that's the only kind of iron our bodies can process. So we can cut that out immediately. We're not going to soak up any of that iron at all.
right.
No plant iron is going to do us any good. So we
I'll be
need
darned.
iron from meat. And so forget that. Now, what about the calcium part? The problem is those oxalates that we take in with the spinach are binding. That oxalate binds to calcium, iron, magnesium, potassium, and in our bodies. And this is what we're trying to supplement, right? We're trying to get more of those things. And yet those
Right.
oxalates that come in with the spinach are binding with those minerals, taking them out of our bodies and out of circulation and forming these crystals. And those things are crazy. I've seen those crystals when someone does what's called oxalate dumping, when they've had a lot of oxalates and they have maybe some joint issues, because these little crystals will build up in the joints, in your thyroid, in your brain, and like anywhere. They can build up anywhere. And your body cannot dissolve them. And so they have to come out mechanically. So if you do this oxalate dumping, if you stop eating oxalates after being really affected by them, what happens is, and I've seen pictures of this, you might get a little like a rash-like thing on your skin, and it's
Right.
like gritty in there. Those
Oh,
are the
wow.
oxalate crystals when they attach to the minerals, and they have to push out through the skin. I've seen them come out through people's teeth. They actually push out through your teeth. It's crazy. So a lot of people are really sensitive to that. And yet you never hear anything about those plant toxins not allowing us to, metabolize, to use in any way those minerals in the greens. They just say, oh, there's this much iron in spinach and this much calcium in spinach, and so when you eat the spinach, you're going to get these. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. So we need to understand how those toxins that are in those plants are impacting our ability to use those nutrients that are in those plant foods. And they may be in the wrong form to begin with. So K1,
Right.
forget it. We're not going to use that. We need K2 from animals. That's what we actually use. So, we're a lot more like a water buffalo than a spinach.
Right.
Right. So we need to be careful about eating. And that's why I think that, plants are more like medicine. Look at a medicine, because there's a plus side and a minus side to eating them. And there may be some nutrition in some of those plant foods that you're getting that is helping you. I'm not saying that you're never going to be helped by eating any of those foods. You could be, but there's always going to be, a give and take. There's always going to be a downside. So what is the downside of those particular foods that you're eating? And are you impacted by them? You need to see yourself as a single subject experiment and actually test that and see how you feel. See what your symptoms are like, what your labs are like when you're eating certain things and when you're not.
Yeah, that's you got to get really, really logical in a lot of this stuff with yourself, and some people just aren't. So let me ask you this: how do you see? Because the carnivore diet seems to be, it's almost like it's gaining momentum in a lot of ways to the general public.
Yeah.
And people are starting to hear, you're seeing more and more stories on news things that are critical of the carnivore diet and critical of the way that, meat in general, much more so than it seems like it has been in the last, 3 or 4 years in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see the carnivore diet, how the collision that is potential collision between corporations and the carnivore diet, eating the meat, having a meat-based meal? Where do you see that? How do you see that shaking out?
So I'm sorry, the collision between corporations.
Between corporations, your grocery store where all the stuff, the fake food and all of that, and moving away. There was a thing, it was a few months ago, they were talking about the sugar in soft drinks, and Pepsi or Coke was starting to freak out because people were moving away from those sugary drinks or something, and they were trying to figure out a way to combat it or that. But I see that happening in general with the food industry and the meat. I guess you could say the meat industry, because there's a definitive line there. How do you see? How am I? I know there's a question there. I'm just trying to figure out how.
I think we're going to see a change in what's offered at the grocery store as more people realize that they have maybe autoimmune issues or something that they, for whatever reason, they do much better on a carnivore diet. And there isn't a whole lot of research. They're just starting to research this, kind of dietary intervention now. But we really don't have good research on any diet at all. And
Mhm.
so saying, oh, everybody should eat this diet, we don't have research showing that that's the case at all, period. And almost all of the research in the nutrition industry is correlational, it's epidemiological. It doesn't matter that there are 40,000 subjects. In fact, when there are, the big problem statistically is you're going to find differences where there aren't any.
Right.
So, that doesn't make me feel good, about following a plan that's based on that stuff. You can't say anything about causation. You can't say that, living in this part of the world makes you healthier, because it's not living in that part of the world and eating that diet. It's the fact that they're walking everywhere and they're doing a lot of different things other
Right.
than just what they're eating. And that's not taken into consideration. You can eat that same diet here and, just sit in an office all day and not see any impact at all. So, there's just so much misinformation out there based on really bad science. And the more people, there are tens of thousands of people just on Facebook that are coming out saying that, the only way they were able to get relief from a certain condition was by only eating meat, getting all the plants out of their diet.
Right.
And I mean, the more people come out with that, you can't just, shove that under the rug. I mean, tens of thousands of people, it's not like they're just kind of, trying to get popular by saying this. This is not,
Right.
there are a lot of case studies that you have to pay attention to. And especially if you know someone who's had a really good impact of changing how they're eating, then yeah, try that for yourself. See how you do. Realize that what we're being told is in large part incorrect, at least from a basic science standpoint. It's incorrect. And a lot of the people we're going to for advice, like doctors, for example, have none or very, very little education in nutrition. And so they're not the people to go to. So, I think that just like what, take keto, for example, you never saw any keto anything in the store until fairly recently. Now you can't go down an aisle without seeing a bunch of keto stuff.
Right. And
it's
still
not really good keto stuff because it's all like, chemical, sweeteners that are bad for you and things like that.
Relabeled.
Yeah. And so, but I think we're going to see the same thing when there are more people that are demanding a certain thing. The whole supply and demand thing is going to, change the products that are offered.
Gotcha. Well, I know when we started raising cows, because we've got several cows, and the goal was to raise them and then offer them to other people to buy a half a side of beef or a full beef, and have it processed, and we have it packaged and labeled and all of that. And the cost difference it's not just a little bit of cost difference, it's an astronomical.
I bet. Yeah.
Different. I mean, if you bought a full cow in the grocery store, what we serve, you're looking at probably $14,000-$15,000 to buy that in the grocery store versus, $4,500 for a full cow processed. You just have to have a freezer space to put it.
Right.
And it keeps. I mean, we go through a cow a year, just my wife and I, because that's what we eat.
Yeah.
And it forces us, by doing that, it forces us to take the other cuts of meat that people aren't used to seeing or used to eating, to get creative in how you cook it and how you prepare it and all that. It's still great. It still tastes great, but there's certain ways that you have to cook it in that. But people are very resistant to purchasing that. They want to go to the grocery store with a grocery store label on it and pay $16, $17, $20 a pound for, I mean, and it's just really interesting. But I think people are coming around.
I think so too. And with books like Sacred Cow, have you read that? That's a new book out. Great book to read if you're interested in, learning more about the whole idea of raising cattle and the effect on the environment and all that kind of stuff, the effect on health. Sacred Cow, awesome book. There's more and more coming out from a variety of sources, from scientists, from doctors, from coaches, health coaches, from all different communities, because there are people that are personally experiencing, really positive changes with this way of eating in all different industries. And so you're kind of coming at it from all different angles, and realizing that a lot of what we've been told is actually incorrect, and it's hurting us. I mean, if what we were being told was right in terms of how we should be eating, we would be really healthy right now, because there's a ton of that information out there.
Thank you very much.
We are the least healthy that we've ever been since, humans first stepped on this planet. So, something is absolutely wrong. And another great person to talk to or to listen to about this is Jason Fung, Dr. Jason Fung. He's a nephrologist, kidney doctor, and he's kind of the modern guru for fasting. And he has a number of books out that are fantastic. And he actually has a video on YouTube about how obesity started. And it started because of people being afraid of bad cardiac health. And so to help their heart, because what was it? Ike had a heart attack, President Eisenhower, and then Senator McGovern's wife had a heart attack. And back then, like, you didn't know anybody that had a heart attack. Very few people were having heart attacks, and everybody was eating bacon and eggs for breakfast and everything, right? Just having some coffee once in a while, not snacking, no convenience food, nothing like that. And so then they came out with government guidelines on eating, and unfortunately they farmed that out to some cherry picker bad researchers that were more interested in being popular and famous than they were correct. And so there's a whole history of that. And he gives this talk, and he gives the talk to a room full of doctors about how they, as doctors, actually caused the obesity epidemic because of the guidelines that they were, telling the government we should have. And then they were, following to the letter with their patients. The room did not like the talk at all. But so it kind of, you could see there weren't many questions, there wasn't a lot of interest. But man, he had science behind everything. Like, there's no way you could argue with what he was saying. And it was just interesting to see, okay, we went from eating butter to eating margarine, and then the obesity started climbing, right? Just that one change. Like, it's amazing how, as we get away from the natural diet our ancestors ate, and more into more modern, food that we've messed with in some way or another, that's not actually food anymore. Our bodies don't know what to do with it. And it's causing all kinds of problems. And I just don't see how that is not common sense to everyone.
Well, that's, it comes down to perspective, and a person's perspective is their reality. And until their reality changes, their perspective won't change. So, but yeah, with us and the cows and the pigs and that, we render our own lard, from the tallow from the cows and the lard from the pig. And we've got, jars and jars and jars of it in the freezer. And that's all we cook with. I mean, and literally the interesting thing is when we had chicken wings last night.
So did I.
And we just fried them up in just naked. We just fried them up in the lard and cooked them, pulled them out. They're not greasy. There is no grease. And then when I take it, when it cools and I put it back in the containers, all three containers I pulled it out of, 2 of them were full. The third one was missing about 1/16 of an inch of material. So the food does not absorb lard. It fries it, but it does not absorb it like, your Wesson oils and your canola oils and all that, which absorbs into the food and causes issues. And it's not greasy.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
And those are stable fats. They're stable. Our bodies know what to do with them. They're totally natural for us to be eating, and they're stable. If you use, seed oils or vegetable oils, they go unstable. First, the whole processing of those things is an environmental nightmare. It's horrible. And a lot of poisons go into the environment and everything from those plants. But then all it takes is just exposing the bottle to sunlight, and now you've got trans fat. Like now it's something that's really going to impact your health. And those oils, there's some research showing that those oils are more likely to give you insulin resistance than eating a bunch of sugar. So, I mean, that's a very unhealthy thing. When we went from butter to margarine, we made a serious misstep.
Oh yeah, what was it when I was a kid? It's not nice to fool Mother Nature,
right?
The margarine,
I
or
remember
I can't
that,
believe
yeah.
it's not butter type thing. I mean, they pushed it hard.
Yeah.
All right, so any books that you have, any training that you want to share? I'm going to put your, let me see here. I'm going to put your website up here. That's your website.
It is, yes.
And let people know about that, how to get in contact with you.
You just, scroll around on the website and you can see what I have to offer. I do have a book out right now, that Reconstructing Reality book, and I'm working on a workbook actually right now. I just finished the rough draft, so that'll be out before too long. And that's the first book is more of a theoretical book. It's the why behind, the hypnosis in general, because I need to know. And so maybe I'm wrong, but I put my ideas out there as a brain scientist who's doing this work now. And I just find it fascinating. And it's a fun read and an easy read. And there are a lot of really cool case studies in the book as well, if you want to see all the different ways that hypnotherapy can help different kinds of things.
And as soon as we hang up from here, I'm going to be ordering the book.
So. Nice. Well, I hope you enjoy it. Let me know what you think of it.
I will absolutely let you know. Anything else that you want to add?
No, just, hey, thanks for spreading the good word on both the hypnotherapy front and the carnivore front, because there's, so much good to be had from changing our worldview about, some things like those things. And, I've been trying to give whatever credibility I have to the field to try to, get rid of misconceptions and try to just get people healthy, healthy and happy.
And do you work with clients on over video?
I do. I have clients all over the world actually that I work with over video. So yeah, I do. I'm not taking on a lot of clients these days. I'm doing more teaching, but I do take on some. And so I do free consultations. And even if anybody would just like to, chat about this, I may pass them on to one of my associates, but I'm always happy to talk to people to help educate them in all this.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us here
today.
Wayne. It's been really educational, and I'm so happy to have now met you and got to know you, and that it just tickles me to know.
Right back at you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Keep up the great work, man. Appreciate it.
Talk to you later.
All right. Bye-bye.